But Charles, what is the situation then with defence/war in general? Because there's a review coming.
There absolutely is. Yes, another one. And this is really prefixed with what Brian and Mike indeed have been talking about, certainly with regard to the new government and John Healey, the Defence Minister, effectively talking about not only the defence of the United Kingdom, beginning with the defence of Ukraine, as though there is some existential threat to the United Kingdom because of what's happening in Ukraine and Russia, but also that you, as a member of the population, are too stupid to understand exactly what's going on. However, they are going to set it out for us, and they've commissioned a new strategic defence review. And if this gives you the sense of déjà vu, that will be because some of the people involved in it this time round are the same as last time. So here we see effectively the press release on the government website, and they talk about it requiring a new type of review. Of course, the last sort of comparable one was in 2010, the Strategic Defence and Security Review in the Cameron coalition government. But here we have it being led by, well, effectively being led by the Defence Secretary, John Healey, but really underlying that by Lord Robertson, Fiona Hill and General Richard Barrons. So we'll go through them one by one. The first thing to say about Robertson, of course, is that he was there in 98 for the Strategic Defence Review of the then Blair government. And since then, he's been involved in a number of different places, but most significantly BP, where in actual fact he's been a special advisor with regard to Russian investments, interestingly, but also he has been involved with the United States-based Cohen Group, set up by William Cohen, the former American Defense Secretary, in the late 90s, early 2000s. So it's very obvious which way we are looking with regard to this defence review. Also, I thought I'd point out that The Guardian here reporting back in 99 when Tony Blair nominated Robertson to go for the Secretary General of Nato job, he said if George gets the job, he can be replaced as Defence Secretary without too much trouble, effectively saying that he wasn't perhaps going to be the best person for that job. Now, the reason I mentioned Blair is that we've looked at this again in the past, but the Institute for Global Change, of course, is very much heating up their defence rhetoric, and they've recently had their Reimagining Defence conference and new capabilities. So that would be the time to mention the appointment of Nick Carter, former head of the armed forces here, and his connections to Helsing Defence and their cyber, AI and drone capabilities. So the sort of the theme of vested interests here is a very, very strong one. Then we've got Fiona Hill, the presidential advisor to the White House 2017 to 2019 under Donald Trump. And of course, bearing in mind that the likely bet now, especially in light of what's happened, is that Trump might well be in the chair again later this year. She, of course, has the contacts. But just to give an idea of what sort of a view she has on defence and the current situation now, this is an article from Politico in February 2022 saying, yes, he would, meaning that Putin would absolutely use nuclear weapons. Her sort of summary of what she stated in that interview that was transcribed into an article, she believes that there's been a long-term policy failure by NATO, in effect, not to contain Russia and stand up to Russia. She believes that Russia will not stop at Ukraine, that they really are after a territorial conquering of other parcels of land, that there needs to be an international response to stop Russia, i.e. beyond NATO, beyond the EU, an international response. She absolutely believes that Putin wants to use nuclear weapons, and she has gone as far as directly comparing Putin to Hitler. So that's how she sees things. And of course, she is going to be very influential. I should have mentioned also that that set out in the government press release, it was made very clear that this wasn't going to be something that just happened within government. It was also going to be without. And we've already looked at some of the vested interests here and indeed the connections. So we should be under no illusion that this is going to involve an awful lot of interested parties well outside the arena of government. Now, the next person to look at is Barrons, General Sir Richard Barrons, who was commander of the joint, my apologies, I forget the previous job he held in the army, Commander Joint Force Command, that's what it was. Anyway, you won't be surprised to know that he is now involved with Universal Defence and Security Solutions, so he is, in effect, in the defence industry, and worth noting that he is specialising very much on AI, the cyber part of it, as well as space, which of course we've talked about recently, and indeed the modernisation of defence.
Right.
And Mike's just got another point on
yes,
this.
Yes, the other point to make about General Sir Richard Barnes, of course, he's a personal friend of Chris Donnelly, and therefore, and I believe he was part of the Institute for Statecraft at the time. So he is an absolute Russophobe.
Yeah, absolutely. And Russophobe was the tag really that I should have applied to Fiona Hill. I mean, obviously in the mainstream, she's referred to as a Russia specialist, but these days it's increasingly hard to find a Russia specialist that is not in actual fact a Russophobe. So these are a sort of snapshot into the people that are going to be leading this defence review and the likely direction it's going to go in, which is going to be a very close tie to the United States and a sole focus on being part of NATO that is pursuing a proxy war against Russia by keeping, in all likelihood, keeping Ukraine at arm's length because of the Article 5 responsibility to become involved directly with Russia should NATO become, should Ukraine become a member of NATO. So what we'll do now is we'll just look back at sort of how we've got here and the situation we are in. And I'm going to mention Patrick Sanders, General Patrick Sanders, who has just finished as head of the British Army and joins that very long list of generals who says all the important stuff the moment he's left the army. He has just said that he believes that the British Army is in such a parlous state that they might be able to fight a small war for approximately 1 month, but no more than that. And I've put the picture on screen of Keir Starmer in his probably not particularly well-ironed combat. So he's getting amongst it, and he's, being pushed on by people like Sanders speaking out against this. But of course, whilst Sanders's views should be taken, well, certainly with perhaps a pinch of salt, they should also be viewed in the context of the suggestions of both national service and conscription, because in effect the provocation of response is meant to be that we are in a situation where there is an existential threat to the United Kingdom, and in order to counter that and put Ukraine first and the UK first, people need to get behind defence and to support it by putting young men and women in the firing line. So that's why I mentioned Sanders in particular. But really, we have to look at who benefits from this. And this is from the Financial Times this morning, showing the 5-year chart for the all-share aerospace and defence industries, with the red arrows showing, first of all, when the Ukraine conflict started in February 2022, and then Gaza in October 2023. And it's very clear that all of these people who are going to be involved in this review are benefiting in some way from the upward trajectory of that graph. And that really is a huge part of what it's about. So also where we are now with regard to the integrated operating concept, the IOC, which again we've talked about a lot before, but I put it previously that we are somewhere between the third and fourth stages, constrain being proactive and assertive. It may involve the use of force, and of course the next step being war fighting. So, Mike, I'm sure you've got some follow-up comments to make, and we'll keep an eye on how this does go. But they're saying it's going to be conducted at pace and will be delivered early in 2025.
Yes, you mentioned the integrated operating concept. We've got to always keep in mind that was the military doctrine where the UK openly declared that its own population is potentially as much an enemy as any foreign population.
Yeah, very, very good point.
Yes.